As always, nothing you hear on the Stripped Pod should be a substitute for personalised professional medical advice. Please always consult your clinician or other medical professional before making any changes to your diet, dosages, or healthcare plan.
Hello and welcome to the Strip Pod, your weekly diabetes fix, where we strip back the stigma for real, honest conversations about diabetes beyond the numbers.
I'm Ash, a passionate diabetes advocate and founder of Strip Supply.
And I'm Braden, co-host of the Art of Working Pancreas.
Coming up on today's pod, we are joined by Kelly Schmidt, a registered dietitian, functional nutritionist, and fellow T1D, dialing in all the way from America, who's on a mission to help people manage diabetes without the burnout. But first, Braden, I cannot wait any longer. You ran a half marathon on the weekend. How did it go?
Oh my God. Okay. I'll preface this whole chat. So this might go for a while. So strap in. I apologize if I ramble a little bit, but
Can you give us like a kilometer by kilometer update?
Actually, possibly. Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Which is never a good thing if I'm doing that, right? It was the hardest thing I have ever done in my life. By far. So I did the Gold Coast half marathon last year, and that felt like a breeze compared to what I went through yesterday. It was just yesterday. That's crazy. My body is so sore and it takes me a while. So like if I've been sitting for a few hours, I'll stand up and be like, okay, right leg, left leg, and then start walking. Like I need to like get going a little bit.
Remind yourself, yeah.
I'm like a little wind up toy, like I need winding up and then just let me go.
How old are you turning this year again? 65?
Hey, come on now. You're older than me. Let's not go there, all right? But no, look, it was the hardest thing mentally, physically I have ever done. I'll dive into it, but I might just set the scene a little bit first. So obviously I've been training for a while and probably not training to the extent that I would have liked. And I had a fair few issues during training as well. So I had this new pair of shoes, which I bought secondhand off someone who'd done a marathon last year. And I was really excited to use them. And they're like carbon plated, so they're like really expensive and blah, blah, blah. But anyway, I'd wear them and just my right foot right at the front would get really, really sore after like 5Ks. So, and I tried them a few times and it kept having the same result. I was like, oh, this is not great. And it was literally it was last weekend. I was wearing them and I was like, okay, this is the last chance because if they still hurt, then I'm cooked. So I wore them. My right foot, only my right foot was so sore. And so I had the idea, I was like, I might take the insoles out and put the insoles from one of my other pairs of shoes in case like his foot has molded super weird, something like that. Anyway, I took the insole out and there was a piece of rubber under my right foot, right where it's hurting, about that thick. So it's like a couple of mil thick. And it was literally right where my foot was hurting. And it wasn't in the other shoe or any of my other shoes that I own. So the person before me who had these shoes obviously had some issue with his right foot, but didn't take the rubber out. And I had no idea it was in there until I went to change the insoles. So then that confused me even more because I was like, well, these shoes might actually be okay. I was ready to park them up and run in another pair of shoes. And so I took that little bit of rubber out, put the insoles back in, the same ones. Went for a run on Tuesday, so this was a couple of days ago, and they were sweet. Like my feet were fine. So just this little piece of rubber had really caused me a lot of head noise with these shoes, right? But then on the other front, I also had a lot of issues with the diabetes this year in training. So I'd go for runs and I'd do sort of the same tactic each time where I'd set my basal at about 20%. I'd start off a bit higher. But then some runs, my level would just plummet. Like I would just get that down arrow. So I love the Medtronic app for that because I can see exactly what's happening. I'd get the down arrow and I can't stop it, right? So a few times that would happen, a few times it'd be perfect. And I sort of came up with this strategy on race day. Okay, I'll wake up, I'll set a temporary target the night before. So Saturday night, I'll set a temporary target for 8.6. So that should keep me at 8.6 throughout the whole night. I wake up at 8.6. I had a little strat where I'll have a couple of bits of raisin toast and an apple, get my level up to about 14, right? We get to the night before the race. and I was sitting on the couch, and I think eating dinner, and I bolused, and it'd probably been 4 or 5 days since I'd done a site change, and I bolused, and I was like, oh, that feels a bit sore, like it's starting to clog up a little bit. I was like, I can't risk it, like I don't want to risk it. So I changed it the night before the race. Felt fine, put it in, all sweet, went to bed. Woke up at about 2:30 in the morning on race day, and my level was 16.
Why?
So my site that I put in, I pulled it out 2:30 in the morning, and it was bleeding. So like I'd obviously put it straight into a blood vessel, and it hasn't been working at all. So my level's now 16, right? It's 2:30. I'm due to get up at 4
My
to start
God.
running at 6 a.m. And the last thing I wanted at all was any insulin on board.
Mm.
And so I had to get my level back down. I had to. And I bolused, came back down to about 13. And then it
Mm.
started going up again. And this was about 3:30, quarter to 4. It started going back up, and I was like, that's really weird. So I changed it again. I changed it
Mm.
twice within 2 hours.
Mm.
And finally, the third one, I bolused again, just a little bit, not like heaps. I just wanted to get it down a smidge. And like I
Mm.
knew I didn't have to start running till 6. So I knew like by then I shouldn't have any insulin on board.
Mm.
So anyway, I saw it start coming back down. Saw the down arrow. I thought, okay, sweet, I could be on. So I had brekkie, didn't bolus for any of it, and got my level back up. And it was about 14.8 when I got to the start of the half marathon. So I got to the start, was standing there for a little bit, just stretching, warming up. So it's about 10 to 6, right? About to start at 6. Level's about 14.8, beauty. Happy days. Set my bolus for the whole race, set my bolus for 20%, turned off smart guard, so it wasn't like adjusting to my blood sugar level. It's just giving me that 20% of my basal,
Mm-hmm.
which is what I did last time. The exact same strategy I did last time. I remember
And it
talking about
worked
this
really
last
well.
year. It worked perfect. So I was about 13 the whole time, had 3 gels, and it just flatlined at 13, right?
Mm.
So I thought, yeah, I'll do the same thing. It'll be sweet. Ha.
Sounds like
Oh.
diabetes had different ideas.
Oh my God. So I'm just going to pull up a map because I can remember where everything happened, and I'll talk through sort of not kilometer by kilometer, but a little bit of a breakdown. So I started 14.7, 14.8, something like that. It was flatlining. It was great. It was about 5Ks in, I want to say. Where am I? 3Ks. We crossed the Story Bridge. So there's a lot of hills in Brisbane, right? There's a lot of
Mhm.
hills. And we ran just about every single hill. 3Ks, get over the Story Bridge. I checked my phone, 14.8, still flatlining. Beautiful. Like, that's exactly what I wanted to see, right? Get down, we chuck a U-turn, go up another hill, and then come back up over the Story Bridge. And so this is about 6 kilometers in, and I have a look, and my blood sugar level's going down. I've got the down arrow, and I'm about 13.8, something like that. And I knew from having done this so often in training that I'm not going to stop that unless I get onto it really early. So my plan was just 3 gels again, about 8Ks, 14Ks, 16, 17Ks. And each gel has about 25 to 30 grams of carbs, right? So 75 grams of carbs, that should just flatline me across the whole run.
Theoretically.
So going up the Story Bridge, I'm eating lollies. I had a packet of lollies in my
Mm.
running belt.
Yep.
A little snap lock bag of lollies. And I'm
Mm.
eating them. Get over the Story Bridge, start coming back down. Level's still going down. And I thought, this is not good. So I had a gel at about 7Ks, which is a lot earlier than I wanted. I took 4 gels just in case this happened because I thought it might. I took a gel, about 25, 30 grams of carbs. Level just kept going down. And so from there, I was in trouble. So by 10Ks into the run, so just before halfway, I'd had 2 gels, the whole snap lock bag of lollies, and I had some Gatorade as well. So I'd had, I don't know, let's call it 80, 90 grams of carbs, right? And I'm just trying to get this blood sugar level to stabilize, and it's still going down.
How? What is happening?
Yeah. I honestly, I don't know. And I'd love to know because it happened to me a few times in training, and all I thought, like, this actually then just consumed my mind because I was like, how am I going to stop this? Because I can't just stop. I can't just stop and buy something. So yeah, 11Ks, I knew I was in trouble. About 12Ks, I had my third gel, which
Oh
was a
my, so
lot more than I was expecting.
you're like
So I've,
barely halfway.
yeah, just over halfway. I've had 3 gels and a whole Snaplock bag of lollies.
A balanced
Right.
party mix.
It was, I don't know what the
Snakes
brand is, but
Alive.
they're little like black currant, like
National Confectionery.
lifesaver ball things. I think it's, actually can't remember. It's in the cupboard. But
That's
they're
okay.
like
We'll talk
little
about your choice of
sugary,
lollies later.
little sugary things coated in sugar. So I was like, yeah, sweet, got heaps of sugar.
Yeah.
Anyway,
So
I've had all that.
halfway through the race,
Yeah.
what were your levels sitting at after all that stuff? 90
I
grams
was
of carbs.
I was about 10 and still going down.
How?
All I wanted to see was a flat line. All I wanted to
Yeah.
see was it to just stabilize, so then I could be sweet. But by then, I've had 3 gels, a pack of lollies. Like I'm not feeling too well. So anyway, get through 13, pushing towards 14K mark, and like my level's still dropping, and I'm starting to sort of feel it. Like I'm losing energy because my blood sugar level is dropping so fast. I had to stop. I stopped. I ran past a cafe, looked in the window, and I was like, what have they got? What have they got? Went in, got a bottle of Coke. Right. I got a full sugar Coke. So it was one of those glass bottles. So it's a weird size, but it had like 38 grams of carbs and sugar in it.
Mhm.
Absolutely scalped that thing. Like threw it back. And then kept on running. Hit about 14 and a half, 15Ks and like was seeing no improvement. So I had my last gel and that was it. I had nothing else left. So I'd had by 15Ks into a half marathon, I'd had 4 gels, like a Snaplock bag of lollies and a full sugar Coke.
And a
So I had
partridge in a
lot.
pear tree. Yeah.
Yeah, literally just throw anything at me. I've had it. And my level was still dropping. So
I'm just like, I'm picturing like this cafe owner just like doing a thing at 7, 8 a.m. on a Sunday
yeah,
morning. And then like this guy dolled up for the Brisbane Marathon comes in.
runs
It's
in,
like, yo, dude, can I just get a glass
steams
bottle
in.
of Coke, please? Yeah.
Just steamed in. She was sitting out the
Maybe,
front. So she was
yeah.
just sitting out the front of her cafe, just watching everyone run past. And I just turned and just bolted straight in the front door, grabbed this bottle of Coke, and like went to
You're
her
like,
at the checkout. And she like, bless her, she took her sweet time. Like she was like scanned it, manually had to input it on the FPOS machine. I was like, come
oh my
on,
God.
come on. And then my hands were so sweaty that I couldn't open it. So
Well, it's a glass bottle too. It's like the most inconvenient kind of
it was all
soft drink.
happening. Yeah, it was all happening.
Yeah, jeez.
So I had all of that before like 15Ks. And then I was like, I'm just gonna have to push through and just see what happens here. Like
Mm.
that's it. But I think because my level had dropped so rapidly, by this point I'm sort of like 9. I finished the race at 8, but by this point I'd consumed so much sugar and so many carbs and my level was dropping so fast that I just ran out of steam. And I think most of it was because like my blood sugar level drops. And when I've run in the past and I can feel my level dropping, it really zaps your energy. And I can feel it. I start sweating a lot more and it zaps my energy. And that was how I was feeling. And so for the last about 4Ks, I had to sort of walk, run, which I really like. I don't enjoy doing that because I love running, right? So the thought of me having to walk for part of a half marathon and people just running past me was just so painful. But that's what I had to do. And I got to about 17Ks and this thought, like I was running and I just thought I can't finish this. Like I can't. Like I've been through it and yeah, it was mentally, it was the hardest thing. So then I was like, you know what? Like if you have to walk part of this, just walk, you'll finish. And that's the thing that matters, right? So I walk around all the way back and it was crazy because I got to like 19Ks and I was like, you know what? It's only 2Ks left. And 2Ks for me is nothing, right? But I couldn't. I physically, my legs were not working and I could not run. So I like was walk running and I crossed the finish line and obviously my partner was there, Emma, and she is a nurse, right? And she saw me at the finish line and I was white. Like I was white as a ghost. My hands were just white. I had no color in me. She said, like, if you were a patient coming into emergency, they'd be like, shit, like, get this guy out the back now and get him on something. Because,
Mm.
yeah, my body had just been through it. And like I finished the half marathon. I think my level was about 8. So I'd gone from 14.8 to about 8 and consumed, 4 gels, so about 110 grams of carbs there, a small packet of lollies, let's call that 30, 140, a Coke, so another 30, 170, 180 grams of carbs. I felt so crook, and my levels just kept
Yeah.
dropping.
Because even just think about like consuming that much sugar on a relatively empty stomach at like 6 and 7 and 8 o'clock in the morning already,
Yeah.
like you're going to feel crappy after that. You'd already had roller coaster levels overnight. You'd been up, you'd been down. Your sets weren't working. It
Yeah.
just seemed like nothing went right.
Nothing went right. Nothing. Absolutely nothing. And it
Oh,
was so like I had a goal, like I really wanted to sort of get around 2 hours, get under 2 hours. But at the end of it, I'm just so happy that I finished because it was so hard. And I think a couple of factors, potentially the fact that I had to bolus so early in the morning and I potentially still had the effect of insulin in my body. That might have played a part. If I didn't have to do that, I might have been okay. But also the hills. Like I was exerting so much more energy, sweating so much more. So naturally my sugar levels are dropping. And like I haven't done a lot of hill running. So I think those two factors played a bit of a part. And I think, looking back, I definitely wouldn't change my site so close to the race again. I think that was a really stupid thing to do, but I wasn't expecting it to not work, So even when I put it in, it felt fine. I had no idea I'd put it into a blood vessel until I woke up at 2:30 and I was sweating. I was 15. So it was really challenging mentally, physically. My body went through it, and then of course I finished. And as soon as I finished, my blood sugar level just shot, and I went straight up. And like
because the effect of like 200 grams of carbs started to
exactly,
kick in.
yeah, exactly right. So it just shot straight up, and like my pump only reads to 22.2, and I had
It went
above
above that.
22.2 for probably at least half an hour, I think.
Oh, you would have felt so
Um,
gross.
It was so gross. I felt so, so gross. My body was just in like shock. I felt really cold because my body was so hot. So I was feeling freezing. And I just parked it on the couch. I got home, had a shower, parked it on the couch, had a blanket on me, and I just slept.
Yeah. Oh.
But I'd done so much rage bolusing, right? Like I was like, I just need to stop this thing from going too high. But it kept going up. And then naturally it was above 22.2. I had no idea where it was, but then it just came back down just as fast, right? So
Jesus.
it plummeted back down. And then luckily, because I just ran a half, so I was hungry. Like I was pretty hungry. We went and got GYG for lunch. So guzzy. So I had a mini burrito and a large fries for lunch, and my level was about 5.5 at this time.
Oh my, what a
I had
rebound.
that, didn't bolus for any of it, and my level stayed at 5.5.
Oh, your body was going through it.
Yeah,
There was
it
something
didn't
happening
move.
there.
I had like a burrito, chips, carb
All the
central.
rice, carb
Yeah,
central.
and it went nowhere. And then of course, like half an hour later, it was like low, so I was back on the lolly train again. But
Oh,
I
jeez.
I went through it. I really did. And there's a couple of learnings. Like I wouldn't definitely, like I said, I wouldn't change my site so close to race day again. I think that was really silly. But like I wasn't to know, so I just did it. And then I went with the same tactic that I did last time and it worked really well. So I didn't expect it to not work.
To
And
have the complete opposite effect.
yeah, and I took the 4th gel because I was like, I might just take this just in case I need some extra
Lucky you
carbs.
did.
Well, that's right. Yeah. So like the fact that I have 4 gels, pack of lollies and a Coke is absurd. So I have no
I
idea what was
mean,
going on, but
yeah, it sounds like it was a disappointing race. You put so much time and energy into training for this thing. The most disappointing part is you know that you can do it. Like you've done this before, and not just once before, but the amount of times you've been training for this, like the
yeah,
hundreds of kilometers you've run this year in preparation for this.
yeah,
And then diabetes just wasn't having it on the
yeah.
day. And this is something
And
that we talk about all the time. You can't predict it, and you
Yeah.
can't control it sometimes.
You do your best to mitigate all these factors. And I really just wanted a smooth lead into race day, and I got anything else. But so yeah, like disappointing definitely on one hand, but also just so stoked that I was able to finish and just pushed through everything that my body put me through and
I
got
was gonna
across that line.
Yeah, 100%. I was going to say, I think on behalf of everyone listening to this, we're all probably thinking the same thing. I think you should be so proud of yourself for finishing. I actually think that is more impressive than running a half marathon in under 2 hours, because there is nothing harder to break through than when you've hit that mental wall of like, there's no way I can do this. And I think you should be so proud of yourself, because like you said, you couldn't have predicted what happened. How are you to know that the site was going to
Yeah.
just
Exactly,
totally
yeah.
let you down? So
Yeah.
I hope you're proud of yourself, and congratulations on finishing. I think that's incredible.
Thank you.
You got there
I'm
in the end.
I'm getting goosebumps thinking about it again, because like
Yeah.
I crossed that finish line and I just hunched over and I walked through and I saw Emma and I saw like my family, and I had a couple of friends there as well. And I'm getting a little bit emotional now, but I just bawled. I was like, just embraced, and I was like, that was the hardest thing I've ever done.
Mm.
And I just like had tears, and like, I don't know if they were happy tears, sad tears, proud tears. Like, I was just so emotionally, mentally, physically done that I just like, I just broke. And
It had to come out somewhere.
it
Yeah.
was, it like, honestly, so many learnings from this, right? And looking back on it, like, yeah, so many learnings. And I don't know, like, I finished it and I got to like Emma and my family, and I was like, I'm never doing that again. I'm never doing that again. But now that I've sort of a day out and I've sort of reflected on it, I'm like, redemption. Like, give me another shot at this. I want to do this again.
Oh,
So
good. I don't want you, because you love
yeah.
running. Like, you do love these races, and
I do. And I'll keep running, definitely. I'll absolutely
Yeah.
still keep running. But yeah, far out. It was so hard. Like,
What a
was
shit
hard.
race.
Yeah. So
Thank you, diabetes.
that's why I want redemption at this thing. I want another crack
Yeah.
at this. Whether or not the outcome would be different, like my legs just absolutely hit a wall. But, I'd love a fair crack at it. So who knows? 2026.
But hey, well, you came up against, one of the most hardest situations that you've ever encountered, and you overcame it. So I think that's definitely something to be celebrated. I almost want to
thank you.
insert like celebration music here, like
Yeah.
celebrate good times. Come on.
Let's
I promise
go.
I'll stop singing.
So yeah, no, and then
What a weekend.
I
Yeah.
actually thought after that too, and I was watching the people who were still doing the marathon, and I thought I could not do a marathon. Like, I had this absolute
don't think
debacle.
like that.
I had this debacle in a half marathon.
Mm.
How can I do 2 laps of that? And like,
I think physically you could like absolutely do a marathon, but I think it's like that unpredictability, right? It's just like the risk factor
yeah,
of
and, like,
walking into a marathon.
I have no idea about how I'd manage, the blood sugar levels.
There's only like so many gels you can carry on you, right?
Exactly, right?
You got to draw the line somewhere.
Eventually, I'm probably going to poo myself if I have too many gels. So
Don't worry, I hear that's like a rite of passage in marathons.
yeah. Oh, I don't want to experience it, that's for sure. But yeah, I was just thinking, like, full credit to everyone who's done the marathon, Georgie, Sam, everyone. Like, I don't know how you do it with diabetes. Like, it's such a beast. So that was Sunday. That was yesterday. That was literally yesterday.
Certainly a roller coaster story, roller coaster levels, roller coaster
Yeah.
emotions, but you did it. And this is not the last one. I see a redemption coming.
There will
And
be
like
more.
you said,
There will
you
be.
learned something. It wasn't
exactly
a
right.
waste.
Exactly right.
You proved to yourself you could do it, which I think is phenomenal.
The next one I do, I'd like it to be back on flat ground. Let's
Look,
make it an even playing field.
Yeah, me coming from like, I haven't gone for a run in like months. I'm like,
Yeah.
yes, why have you done this to yourself?
Yeah. But even like the flat parts of Brisbane that you think are flat. So like, it went from Howard Smith Wharves all the way down to Tenerife along the river there. So
Oh,
it sort
yeah.
of hugged New Farm and went around there. But there's just slight little inclines that get you They're everywhere.
Cheeky little buggers.
There was like literally no flat ground. And then like, of course, at like 18, 19 Ks, whenever it is, you're coming back through Howard Smith Wharves past Fallon's. And then you got to go up that hill. You know, that big hill that you drive down to get to Fallon's? We had to run up that. And that was at about
my
19
goodness.
Ks. And I was like, I looked at it. And by this point, I was already shot. And I was like, I'm not running that. So I just walked that whole hill. But
As
like,
you should. Like, that is actual, like,
it's torture.
dangerous.
It's torture.
Absolutely. It is.
Yeah.
What's it called when you like to inflict pain on yourself?
Yeah,
A
no,
narcissist.
is that the word?
And I
know.
don't think I'm saying it right.
I like it.
It's
It's good.
like as if diabetes wasn't going to break you, like that hill was going to break you on a good day.
So it was something. Like, yeah,
Yeah.
I wouldn't run that. I wouldn't run that on a normal run, I don't think.
Exactly.
I'd look at it and be
No.
like, nah,
Let alone the
um,
worst diabetes day of the year. But
honestly.
no,
But yeah,
diabetes
like,
threw everything it had at you, and you still came out on top. So you showed it who's
Yeah.
boss. Well done.
yeah, I'm pretty stoked about it. So, like, at the end of the day, obviously, I was going for a much better time than I did. I still did it in 2 hours and 8 minutes, and I was aiming for about 2 hours. So, like, I wasn't like, too far off, but disappointing in that sense. But like, just so happy that I was able to get to the finish line and share that moment with everyone. Like, it was just so nice. So yeah, so it was good. I've got the little medal here. Actually, it's sitting right in front of me. Funnily enough,
Oh,
here it is.
you
Boom.
earned that like
Look
so
at it.
much.
Spins.
Oh,
Yeah,
that's cool.
so
Oh, that's not
This
bad at all.
was wearing this with bloody pride yesterday after the run. I'll
Yeah.
tell you that much. It was.
I took it off. I would have worn it all week after going through what you went through.
Look, I don't know when enough is enough of it. All I wanted yesterday, actually, all I wanted last night was to go to the pub and have a steak for dinner. So I just wanted a steak and chips, right? And
Yeah.
I got to the pub, the local around here, and there was a bloke sitting there wearing his medal still. And it was like 5:30 in the afternoon. I was like, I don't
Yes,
know.
you could absolutely do it for the same day. I think maybe for the rest of the week might be pushing it, but 100%
I
same
should have
day.
worn it to work today. Like,
Honestly, I would have.
Yeah,
If
flex
if
up.
I ever,
No.
yeah, if I ever get close to doing a half marathon, you will not hear the end of it.
well, hey, next year.
Absolutely not. Anyway,
Anyway.
before we dive into the interview that we have, which is absolutely awesome with Kelly,
this is
just want to quickly plug the Jelly Bean Ball, the
Yes.
Denny Foundation Jelly Bean Ball, which is coming up next weekend. We're
Yeah.
just talking off the pod. We've both got our outfits organized.
Yeah.
I've warmed you up that we're going to be filming TikTokies.
Yeah, far
We've
out.
got we've got such a cool gang of people going to the Jelly Bean Ball this year, and we want you to come with us and sit at our table. We have 2 seats left.
I'll buy you a
and
beer.
that's
If you
right.
sign up, I'll buy you a beer if you purchase those seats.
That's
I'll buy
right,
you 2.
and you get
How's
to
that?
ooh, big spender after the marathon. Was it a cash prize or something for finishing?
I wish.
But the Denny Foundation is, of course, raising money to fund insulin pumps for people who cannot afford them. It is life-changing technology, so we will literally be dining on a 3-course meal to change lives next Saturday night, and we want to see you there, all dolled up to the nines. How often do you get to dress up, right? Like we both had to rent outfits for this.
I've never worn a tux in my life.
Really?
I own
You're
a
going
suit.
full
I own a
James
suit
Bond.
jacket. I've never
Yep.
worn a tux. So yeah, I had to rent one. So I'm like, hang on,
Yep.
I've got through almost 30 years of life without wearing one. When am I ever going to wear one again? So
Yeah,
hey,
not sure.
I've gone and rented one. I've committed big time. Flights, accommodation, tux. I'm coming down. So I hope those last 2 seats get purchased by someone, and I want to buy them a beer. So
I know. I want to have such a good night. We're going to boogie. We're going to just connect, have good chats.
It's
I'm
gonna be
so
so fun.
excited. It's going to be so much fun. So it is Saturday, 14th of June in Sydney. We'll leave a link in the show notes to buy your ticket. Put the words strip supply in the table request section, and you'll sit with us. Maybe it's a deterrent saying that you'll sit with us. To sit at the
No,
strip
no,
supply
it's
table.
definitely not. I actually, Saturday 14th, I actually really hope that I make it there because we fly on Friday the 13th, which is not great. So
Oh, my
hopefully we'll
goodness.
see you there. We might not make it, but we'll be there. Yeah, we fly on Friday the 13th. How good's that?
Maybe just like send your tux down separately, and I'll just set it up in the seat in case you don't make it.
Just get a little like cardboard cutout of me or something. I'll send you a photo
Maybe I
from the
should
marathon.
Yeah, I'll organize that this week just in case. But
Yeah.
no, just kidding. We want to see you at the Jelly Bean Ball. We'll leave a
Yep,
link
yep,
to
yep.
the tickets in the show notes. It is honestly going to be such a fun night for such a great cause. So we will see you there.
Absolutely pumped. We can't wait. So looking forward to it. Looking forward to seeing everyone as well. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So let's dive into today's episode. Today we're joined by Kelly Schmidt all the way from the United States of America. Kelly's a registered dietitian, functional nutritionist, and fellow type 1 diabetic. She's also the founder of T1D Nutritionist, where she helps people manage their diabetes in a way that fits their lifestyle to live fuller, healthier lives without feeling restricted. Kelly, you're bringing both personal experience and professional expertise to the table, and we are so stoked to have you on the pod today. Thank you so much for jumping on and welcome.
Yeah, well, I'm so excited to be here. I love my Australians, and I'm just stoked to dive in and talk all the things.
We love that. No, thank you so much for jumping on. Obviously, the time difference is probably throwing us both out of whack a little bit here, but we'll get through and have a great conversation today. But do you want to tell us a bit about your background and your diagnosis journey with diabetes and how that all came to life?
Sure, I'll try to do my best to give an elevator pitch, but I was diagnosed on my 8th birthday. I feel like there's always like a monumental, like a holiday or something for most people, and mine was smack dab on my birthday, and I celebrated it in the hospital, and now that was 33 years ago, and it took a while for me to say this, but I would say the best gift I got there was type 1. And I'm not saying it's easy, but I'm saying it's given me a passion. It's given me so much drive in life and just such good connections with other people, such as this. So I was diagnosed as a second grader. That's what we would call my grade level here in the US. I'm not sure what it is there. I think it's grade 3. I could be wrong. But it wasn't unfamiliar to my family. My dad and uncle all had type 1 diabetes. And out of all the grandkids, and I was one of 4 children, I was the only one and am the only one, knock on wood, with type 1.
Wow.
So my parents knew what to expect, but they'll still say it was scary because each decade of type 1, it's such new technology, new information, new communities, new ways to talking about it. My dad is 72, and when he was diagnosed at 17, his doctor actually told him to tell no one. So even his closest friends didn't know because it was such a weakness, which I hate to even say. And then here we are diagnosed, and it's like, you go to a new class, tell your fitness instructor, tell your teacher for safety. But also it's like, hey, I'm on my insulin, my CGM, not my phone, like all the clarifications and so forth. So that's kind of the introduction of my type 1 chapter. And my dad actually right now, he's struggling. He's actually in the hospital right now.
Sorry to hear.
And he's had a lot of troubles with type 1. He's had maybe every complication you can think of that would come with our disease. And when I was in high school, going off to uni or college, as we would say in the US, I was trying to distinguish what's my major and where do I want to go? Because here in the US, you can pretty much shop at any university throughout the country, and there's a lot of them. And my dad was really sick, and my parents didn't tell us, but he was in kidney failure. And one day I was getting ready to go to school, putting on my uniform. My mom said, hey, we're going to the hospital. Your dad got a donor. I was like, a donor for what? Lo and behold, he got a kidney and a pancreas transplant February 5th, 2002. And I was like in that waiting room for over 10 hours, scared to death, thinking, when is this going to happen to me? And I want to make a stop and make a difference in other people's lives and playing a role. And I wanted to play a role in helping people use food as medicine. So dietitian it was. And I went to school with so much excitement. I graduated the top of my class. I'm not tooting my own horn, but I was just excited to get out there and help people. And I still am. So that's kind of my short story.
Yeah, we love, it's amazing how you're just saying it was seen as such a weakness to be diagnosed back in your dad's era. And now, the next generation on, we're able to use it as a strength.
Yeah.
And we're able to talk about it and empower other people and help other people through this disease, which I think is amazing. And it's full credit to you and the work that you do and your passion for it, which is unbelievable. But do you mind telling us, when you were diagnosed, what was it like when you were diagnosed? Obviously 33 years ago, a lot has changed in 33 years of diabetes.
Yeah.
How was it managed when you were diagnosed?
Yeah. The insulin was not nearly as good as it is now. And the insulin I was using is still around, and some people will use it because in the US, I'm not sure exact price systems. When I lived in Oz, I got medicine pretty easily, but
Yeah.
it's not so easy here.
Mm.
But the medicine I was on was regular and NPH. I don't know if you've ever heard of these insulins, but
No.
NPH is basically a Tresiba or Atlantis. Are those familiar insulin
Yep.
brand names for you? Okay,
Yep.
good. We're aligned.
Yep.
But the thing with NPH is it has really big peaks. So like your basal insulin, you want a flatline background insulin. But I had to have very specific snacks at certain times of the day without having to dose insulin to help cover those peaks and waves. And nonetheless, so I was put on that insulin when I was first diagnosed. And within the first 2 years, I had a lot of seizures. I had a lot of seizures in my sleep. So I was living in a lot of fear because I didn't know how to anticipate that insulin. And of course, there was not continuous glucose monitors. So I was doing a lot of finger sticks. The finger sticks would take like 30 seconds or a minute to give
Oh,
me the
wow.
reading.
Yeah.
Like, oh, I'm a dinosaur.
Yeah.
But it was tricky. But I will say, even through the seizures, even through the fear, my mom was such an advocate. And I give her so much credit to the strength and drive I have today because she only wanted me to feel normal and also live my best. And along with that, she found communities within, without social media and all the connections, but she found type 1 communities and made sure I was always part of that. So that was a big part of my life overall.
Of course.
But
Yeah.
that a little bit about my beginning.
And can we throw it back even further, I guess, as well? Do you know much about your dad's upbringing with diabetes and what it was like for him
Oh,
when
yeah.
he was younger?
Yeah. And I had mentioned that he's dealt with a lot of complications, and there's like a handful of reasons for that. One, he didn't have the community support. He didn't even have any support from close friends until after a while they'd be like, why are you drinking juice in the middle of a basketball game and whatnot? But it was a lot of unknowns. So they would test their blood sugar by peeing on a stick and it would say high, high. Like,
Right.
well,
Yeah.
how much insulin do you take for high? I don't
Yeah.
know.
Yeah.
We're down to like 0.1 dosing right now, or
Yeah.
even smaller than that. So there was that. They had to use reusable syringes. So his brother and sister, he had 2 other sisters as well, but they were like, had reusable syringes that had to be cleaned.
Oh, wow.
Obviously, those would be painful. Their insulin was a lot different. And the trajectory for how long you would live was much shorter. We can figure out how to have lab and non-diabetic ranges with our tools and devices today. And that was much harder back then, much harder to even know overall.
Yeah.
But yeah,
Of course. And I guess if we flip it now to you now, how do you manage your diabetes now?
yeah. I love that you asked this because as someone with type 1 for so long, I've tried a lot of pumps and we haven't
Yeah.
gotten there yet, but I lived in Australia for 2 years. And I remember I had a pump that Australia yet didn't have. And
All of
every
them.
time that probably,
Yeah.
but I just remember I had the Medtronic insulin pump and it would fail. And then I would have to call the US and it would take like 2 weeks to get a replacement. It was just such a
Mhm.
interesting roadmap. But how do I manage my type 1 diabetes now? So I use a very broken system. So throughout my journey, and maybe people listening will relate to this, I have the hardest time with site absorption. Like I can be perfect on my diet. I can be perfect on my lifestyle and activity. And I've dialed that probably in so much because my absorption's so horrible, but I bleed easily. I have sore sites. I get oculations very easily. And that just drives my anxiety. So what I do instead is I take Tresiba, background insulin every morning, and then I wear an Omnipod for just corrections and bullets. So if there's blood in there and so forth, I'm not going into ketones or really extreme high blood sugars because no matter what, I always have that background insulin. But this has helped me a lot with my mental health.
Yeah.
But also, I've just gotten really equipped in knowing how much Tresiba I need. I know my activity, and then just to have really good management. But I don't know many people doing shots and a pump at the same time. And I don't know a lot of endocrinologists who like their patients doing that because it's hard to see what we're doing. But yeah, that's how I'm going about it. And I wear a Dexcom. I wear a continuous glucose monitor.
Okay. Yeah. Well, I guess we'll keep that on the down low. We won't tell you endocrinologists that what you're doing. But I mean, like if it's not broken, why fix it, right? If it works for you. And that's the most important part. And we always talk about that. And it's finding what works for you with diabetes because there is no one size fits all. So
100%.
if it works for you, then that's the best option for you. So that's super interesting though. And what was the insulin pump back in the day that you were using in Australia? We'll dive into your travels soon, but
Yeah,
Out of
it
curiosity,
was,
what was it?
I'm gonna mess up the name, but it was Medtronic, like 1800 or something.
Right.
And when I moved to Australia, moved for my fiance's job, and thankfully I got a visa, so I got to work. But his childhood friend is an American married an Australian, so she lived right by us. And right away, I was taken in by the community and friends, and I was in a book club. And I remember a girl in the book club also had type 1, and she's like, "You have a pump?" She was like, "I can't get a pump unless I get pregnant." And I was just like, it's just really interesting, like, what
Yeah.
risk you have to have more tools. And I know things have changed since then. I lived there in 2010. So that was, 15 years ago.
Yeah.
But I remember being fascinated. I remember my endocrinologist asking me advice about technology. And I'm like, what if I like need help? I'm going to, you don't know. So it's just really interesting. It was interesting. That's the word I'll use.
That's so amazing, isn't it? Like we are, and still we are obviously well behind the technology game down here in Australia. And I mean,
Really?
it's a blessing and a curse because, we are so far away from everything else. But yeah, like we've just got like the new Dexcom and stuff like that. So things are a
Yeah.
little bit behind, but obviously accessibility for us is obviously a big one, and it's a lot easier for us to get insulin and the products that we need for diabetes. As
Oh,
we
yeah.
know, the health system in America is a bit tricky. So back with you and your diabetes now, do you have any diabetes hacks or habits that you're proud of, or anything different that you do? Obviously, you use what you've called a broken, in inverted commas, system. Do you have any other habits or hacks that you have?
That Yeah, I would say something that I might do a little differently and maybe even have a different perspective on managing my type 1 is, um, maybe things that are known but unknown is, like, I always do really well with fasted workouts without insulin on board, so I usually hit my workouts early in the morning,
Yeah.
and that works well for me. But I think another hack is I really pay attention to my gut health to have optimal blood sugars. And I know if my gut's feeling off, my blood sugars go high, hence inflammation, insulin resistance. And that's kind of where I delve into with clients is, are you using food to survive or are you using your food to thrive? And
Mm,
how's that playing in inflammation? How's that playing into healing? How's that playing into your gut? And all disease begins and ends in the gut is my belief. And that would be my, I guess, superpower per se. I don't know if superpower is the word, but hack and how I do things different.
yeah.
And I'd like to heighten this message too, because research on gut health so young and it has a lot more to go, but there's not a lot of things like when we're diagnosed, people are like, so how's your gut? No one asks that.
No.
I mean, for the most part, as far as I know.
Yeah, no.
Yeah. And we're
Yeah.
taught like count carbs and then we're given a few formulas to figure out the rest of our lives. And
Yeah,
it goes much deeper. And that's
absolutely.
where my business, T1D Functional Nutrition, likes to show up.
And we'll dive into that in a sec because I'm super keen to go into more detail about the science behind that and what you do. But what do you think is the hardest part about diabetes? What do you struggle with?
I think the grind is definitely the hardest part. Even when days are going well, you don't forget about it.
Yeah.
I did an experiment one day. I've had a continuous glucose monitor since 2012, and I have decent blood sugars. Not perfect. Who is perfect? But I have decent blood sugars. And I was like, I'm just going to do an experiment and Sharpie my arm every time I look at my CGM. And I did it. And I looked at my watch to look at my blood sugars. My watch talks to my phone and so forth.
Yeah.
And I looked at my watch 68 times
Oh
just
my
to see
gosh.
what my blood sugar was.
Yeah.
And that's just, and that's decent control. When things are a little wonky, let it be my hormones at play or travel or time change, or I know we can maybe get into travel conversation, like there's a lot more insulin resistance and things to play with, but that's on a decent day. So I would say the hardest part of type 1 is definitely the grind, and knowing like the only way is to move forward. And some days we don't feel like moving forward.
Yeah. And it can be such a subconscious grind, isn't it? That like eventually takes its toll because, like you said, you checked your watch 68 times without probably even realizing, right?
Yeah.
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 And so it's subconscious. And at the end of the day, like you wonder why you feel so exhausted. And
Yes.
it's because you're making all these subconscious decisions that not, everyone else has to do. And it does grind you down. So we're very big on the mental health space and making sure that you do what's best for you and what works for you, because at the end of the day we have to make so many extra decisions, be it subconscious or conscious, that other people don't have to make.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
even
Would you agree? Is that what your number one would be?
100%. Yeah, 100%.
Yeah.
And like you even just said then about fasting workouts and going out to work out in the morning because it works better for you. Like, you know, I know when I go for a run in the afternoon, okay, I'm taking my CGM before I leave the house if I need sugar.
Yeah.
I'm also looking at how much insulin's on board because I've been eating all day or whatever it might be. And it's not just as easy as, okay, I'm going for a run. There's so many factors to it, right? So it's the grind. It's the daily grind, and it can become really challenging for a lot of people, which we completely recognize.
Yeah. And I'm sure you've heard this stat before, but someone with type 1 diabetes research study showed that we make an extra 180 decisions, extra 180 decisions a day. That's 65,000 extra decisions a year. That's ridiculous. So we're basically geniuses.
We're robots. We are.
Yeah.
Yeah. I knew about obviously the 180 decisions. We talk about that one on the pod. I've never actually done the calculations for a year. So thanks for enlightening me to that.
65,000.
Oh my God.
Give or take.
No wonder my brain's mush, honestly. We might dive into your travel a little bit that you've mentioned. And obviously you're a big traveler and you've lived down here in Australia for a few years. So how did living abroad impact your diabetes management?
I would actually say, I mean, with the quote, I'm going to misplace it. I'm a little sleep deprived from such a long weekend of sports with my children, but travel changes you. Travel changes you. And I would say just living abroad, I think as a teenager, I knew I'd live overseas one day. Like it was just a dream I had. And then lo and behold, my boyfriend, now husband, fiance at the time was like, hey, I got transferred to Australia. And I was like, let's go.
Awesome. Yeah.
And when I moved there, like you said, you guys are behind the times, and I don't know if anyone heightens this awareness. I would love to go back and live there, to have protected buffer of just like the insane notifications and too much communication and accessibility of always being reached. Because I feel like there's a little more protection there and a little more, I don't even know. I went there last year for 3 weeks, downtime in some way. I just feel like there's a better work-life balance, but overall. But how did living in Australia change me? It changed the way I viewed nutrition. I had such a transformation with my view on nutrition in Australia. I was there for 2 years, and I've actually never shared this story, so this is going to be
Here we
like
go.
record breaking. But I think it's
Hearing it
appropriate
first.
because I truly love Australia so much, and I even thought when we went last year for 3 weeks, I'm like, would we move back? Like, if the opportunity laid itself out. I was coming up on the end of my visa. My husband had a 2-year visa, and I did too. I was a de facto, and I had 457. Is that what it was? But I don't think it's that as easily offered these days, but I might have those numbers wrong. It's 15 years ago.
There's a lot of visas.
Yeah. And we were like ready to renew and like kind of root down and live there forever. But I was in an accident and I broke my jaw. So big tragedy. And I had a sales job in Australia, and my husband and I both actually traveled together, and I got to see the country, meet all the people, see all the land. And it was just something I will never forget. But I was in this kind of traumatic event and I broke my jaw. And I remember looking out of Alfred Hospital in Melbourne and just looking out the window and saying, you know, I just want to open a private practice. My credentials don't reciprocate in Australia necessarily. I would have to go back to school to be a dietitian. And I want children. And knowing I wanted children, I was like, I just have so much fear with type 1. I have so much fear with type 1 and being able to have a healthy child and that be my responsibility. And again, I can still picture looking out that window and saying, I'm going to do whatever I can to have the best health. And I kind of evolutionized how I ate. I wasn't just counting carbs anymore. I wasn't just eating low carb, and I don't eat low carb anymore. And I can get into that. But I started reaching for more whole real food. I wanted to eat as close to the farm as possible, as often as I could, and use food as wholesome nutrition and to fill nutrient gaps and eat a diverse diet. So I started doing that, and I was like, dang, all of a sudden I had better insulin sensitivity. And from there, I started doing more and more research. I became more equipped at private practice dietitian coaching, and I moved back and I opened up my practice. But just the market, I mean, my weekend routine was going to the farmer's market, and like, it's hard to find something like that here. And even like, I remember going into, what's your grocery store? Myers, Kohl's, I think.
Yeah,
Am I getting those right? And I'm like, whoa, the cheese aisle is like a section. It's not a whole 4 aisles. Like if you go to grocery stores here, there's so much paralysis of like, what's the healthy thing, and way too many options. And I just found food very simple and wholesome there. And even like the amount of pesticides and herbicides and genetically modified food in Australia is far less than the US. And then, fast forward 2 years after living abroad and coming home, and I was like, oh my God, I had culture shock in my own country.
Mm.
Because it was just like so much heavily processed, so much more sugar. And granted, I live in the Midwest. I don't live on the West Coast. I would say West Coast California. A lot of people envision that of America, especially coming from Australia. But
Yeah.
where I live, it's like crock pots and slow cookers and lots of cheese and heavy dishes. And
Yeah.
it was tricky. It was tricky. So I would say my nutrition changed in Australia and therefore my diabetes changed.
Yeah. And what do you think the main difference is between food in Australia and the States? Is it that
Yeah.
it's a lot more processed in the States and you get a lot more fresh in Australia? Or what's the main difference, do you think?
I would say that's accurate. I think there's more appreciation for food in Australia. I remember again 2 years, well, my first few weeks there, I was like, whoa, food's so expensive. So I'm not just gonna like buy a ton of food and just throw it in the kitchen and not be
Yeah.
aware of what's there. But I just found there's like more appreciation and love and seasonal eating as well. Like I found like, pumpkin was very seasonal there, not like eating throughout the year and so forth. And I felt like there was, again, it might have been just my small experience as two individuals without kids yet living in the country and had various friends with no kids. But I just felt like we were just very intentional about what we bought, what we ate, how we enjoyed it, and wasted less. And again, that could just be my small sample, but very different than here.
I think that's one of the blessings that we have in Australia is obviously it's such a big country. So we have a lot of farming and a lot of the food
Yeah.
is, like you said, seasonal. So it
Yeah.
is, it's not being stored for 6 months of the year. So we are very lucky there. And when you're talking about food as well, like you've traveled to a lot of different countries, even through Europe and stuff like that, obviously, where, it's hard to come by a fruit or a vegetable sometimes in those countries. How did you manage eating
Yeah.
different foods while traveling, in those trickier countries?
Yeah. I don't know if this should be on the record or off the record, but I'll like bring in my own things that are packaged. And usually sometimes they're safe, but like I find the hardest thing with travel is finding adequate protein.
Yeah.
I think you travel as well, but I'm always like, okay, where can I get protein? And then I do always try to seek out like a market or grocery and just get something to have like my plan B. So my plan A is, of course, to eat anchored meals throughout the day and, things that work for my blood sugar as well. But my plan B is whatever's in my purse or pocket because there's the situations we need. But I'll quickly try to figure out where to source things that are more quality. But it's real tricky because the brands are completely different.
Mhm.
And it's like, okay, I got to familiarize myself with the ingredients and I'll whip out Google Translator if it's a different language and just skim ingredients to understand what's in the product. But it's a little bit of a dance, definitely. Definitely.
It is, yeah. It's really challenging sometimes, isn't it? Especially in those European countries where access to fruit and veggies and proteins is quite tricky, and they're very carb heavy sort of diets, which obviously doesn't really work in our favor too much. Yeah, your insulin intake sort of increases in those countries. But I'm keen to talk to you more about obviously you as a dietitian and a functional nutritionist and your work with food, and you obviously talk about using food as medicine.
Yeah.
Can you tell us sort of what this means to you and how people with type 1 diabetes could apply this in their lives?
Yeah. Yeah. I'm going to flip it first back to a question. Do you ever think of type 1 diabetes as an inflammatory disease?
I'm going to say no.
I'm putting you on the spot.
Yeah,
But
yeah. No, I don't.
yeah. And I really didn't either. And it goes back to that February 5th, 2002, while my dad was getting new organs put into his body. And I remember being like, man, my dad's so compliant. So compliant, a word that we all love with type 1. And he did everything his doctors he told him to, but it wasn't enough. And granted, the medication, everything was a lot different. The monitoring, the management was all different. But he was always compliant. And I was like, when I was diagnosed, I had fruit, starches, and fat exchanges. I was like on an exchange diet. And then that transformed to counting your carbohydrates. I realized that all carbohydrates aren't equal. And why aren't they equal? Like, why am I more sensitive to carbohydrates that are more whole real foods than something that's precisely measured and has a food label and tells me exactly how many carbs there, but my insulin ratio doesn't work right. And I really just started thinking through that and identifying like, what is information to the body? And the more whole real food we give to our body, the more clear those messages are within. And with type 1 diabetes, it is very inflammatory. If you looked at some research, again, research is young on gut health, but people with type 1 diabetes tend to have lower gut bacteria diversity. And what do I mean by that? So the gut bacteria, or excuse me, where our gut bacteria lives is basically the colon. So I think of the colon like a garden bed. So in my backyard, in my garden bed, I want a bunch of vegetables and fruit and flowers. But with type 1 diabetes, the diversity of that good bacteria is usually slimmer. And if we have less diverse bacteria in our gut, usually the inflammation in our body's higher, the immune system's a little derailed, and autoimmunity can persist. I very much simplified that, but it's just information that we're not really given and in a handout when we're diagnosed or much even talked about through the years of having this disease. And there's ways to change diversity. Again, of course, eating a diverse diet. The average American, I know stats on America, average American only eats the same 15 foods every week. But it's really important that we rotate those spices, that we do eat seasonally, that we change up those fruits, those carbs, those proteins, those fats that we eat to help diversify the gut and fill nutrient gaps and so forth. But now I'm going on such a tangent, I forget your original question. But overall, yeah, I would actually regroup and ask you for your question. But I think it's important that we shift our perspective on not just eating for our blood sugars, we're eating for our overall health.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more. And like, happy for you to go on a tangent. I think what you're talking about is so important. And it was actually led into my next question about carbohydrates and what you said about carbohydrates not being equal. What should people with diabetes know about carbohydrates?
What we should know about carbohydrates is it's important to have an idea of like how many carbohydrates are on our plate or how many carbohydrates in our snack. That is helpful, but that's not where the formula should end. That's not where the advice should end. And I would say there's limitations to carb counting. And if we think about what are those limitations to carb counting, and we can go through some examples. So if I had a cup of beans or legumes and a cup of white rice, I would need to take the consideration, let's say 30 grams of carbohydrate of rice, 30 grams of carbohydrate of legume, how to dose my insulin very differently. I would need to take insulin 20 to 30 minutes before eating that rice. And for those beans, I should probably take insulin as I'm eating them and have it extend over a half hour or so. So you have to think about how the carbohydrate digests. In a way, you have to think about that glycemic index. You have to think about what that carbohydrate's paired with. It's important to be aware, like, am I gaining weight? Am I losing weight? If I'm counting carbs, that carb to insulin ratio needs to change. If that carbohydrate's paired with a protein or fat, again, and to think about how fast it will digest, to think through. So when we're told to count carbs and all of a sudden we bottom out when I eat pizza and then I'm 300 later, that the advice isn't count your carbs and cover insulin. It's figure out the digestion, think about the experiment of how it works for you and how to cover it appropriately.
And what changes the insulin sensitivity, like you're talking about with pizza, obviously, as a good example? What is it in the foods that makes some, more resistant to insulin?
Yeah, I think of the pizza study. Have you heard of the pizza study? It was by the American Diabetes Association, I
No.
believe. So there was a study, and what they did is they measured people with type 1 diabetes eating pizza, and they found that when the threshold of about 40 grams of fat, so think of pizza, think of burger, think of ice cream, trying to think of these like high carb, high fat kind of meals, that you can have insulin resistance up to 7 hours later. You may need 65% extra insulin beyond the carbohydrates. So fat's a huge player. And we might realize that, like, oh, my blood sugars are fine for like the hour after a meal. And then all of a sudden it just started floating up and got real stubborn and sticky. And I needed to keep correcting. But we almost need to anticipate that. So what changes it is fat can make our cells very insulin resistant. And I like analogies. I like metaphors. So I think of like a very insulin sensitive cell, like a water balloon. And then I think of a very insulin resistant cell, like a ball of tinfoil. And it's really hard for insulin to suction onto tinfoil, easier to suction on a water balloon. And fat can make our cells turn more like tinfoil. It's not necessarily like fat has this magic power to raise carbohydrates or glucose in our blood, but it makes those cells more insulin resistant later on. So that's something that's really important for us to understand so we can take insulin and not have to restrict our diets to an extreme. to
And so
live our lives.
what should people look for then? When obviously we were told to look for carbohydrates and count carbohydrates, but what should people be looking for on that nutritional label?
I think going beyond just the numbers, I think it's important to know like what's in the food. And I always ask people, what do you look at when I have clients? I'm like, what do you look at on a food label? And they're like, well,
Yeah.
I usually look at calories. I usually look at protein because, I'm aging. I need to get on my protein and save my muscle and bones and all that. And
Yeah.
yada, yada. And I do like the power protein and my carbohydrates. And I was like, well, do you ever put much focus into the ingredient list? And I think it's important to look at the ingredient list. Like, again, it might be more in America, but like things that are better to avoid is like the high fructose corn syrups, a lot of the sulfites, nitrates, a lot of those chemicals that are harder for the body to excrete. But it's important to look there just for overall health. I know we're talking about type 1 diabetes, but I like to bring in the full picture.
Yeah.
But it's important too to see, okay, what's total carbs compared to my fat, compared to my protein? How will that digest in my body? Will it be slow or fast? If fat's really high and carbohydrates are really high, that's going to be a little harder to cover with insulin than if that fat was lower or vice versa. So it's just really understanding how those macros work in your body and when they're together and when they're not. And yeah.
And just further, I suppose, obviously it's important for everyone to, I guess, understand their own body and how your own body responds, I suppose, to carbohydrate intake and those different things. But there's also what we talk about and what you talk about naked carbs.
Yeah.
So not only is there, carbs that we have to count, but then there's naked carbs. I mean, that sounds fun, but like,
Yeah.
what are they, and what should
Yeah.
people know about naked carbs?
Yeah. Naked carbs would be something that pure carbohydrate. Again, if you look at the food label and the carbohydrates are the most, and there's not much protein or fat or fiber there. And therefore, it'll just spike blood sugars very quickly. So examples of naked carbs could be like a ripe banana. Naked carb could be white rice, again, even brown rice particularly, because rice is just so glucose forward. Maybe a white potato, white bread by itself, rice cake, cereal, crackers, pretzels. Those would be naked carbs. But if we pair those carbs with either protein or fat, we can slow that absorption down. So I think a naked carb will spike our blood sugars. I don't know how many people are skiing in Australia, but spike our blood sugars like a black diamond. Black diamonds are very steep. I don't touch them.
Yeah.
My adrenaline is gone at this age, but we want everything to turn into a bunny hill. We want those nice, slow slopes. So if we take a naked carb, pair it with protein or fat, we can slow and buffer that glucose breakdown to have better capability of our insulin marrying up pretty well.
It's so interesting, isn't it? There's just so many different factors to food and to carbohydrates that most people don't know about, and you're not taught about this when you're
Yeah.
diagnosed with diabetes. So it's really interesting
Yeah.
to hear it, from an expert, someone who knows so much about the space. So we might chat about functional nutrition now.
Yeah.
Can you explain this a little bit and how it differs from sort of a more traditional approach to diet and diabetes?
Yeah. When I think conventional approach to diabetes is one, just being enlightened that there's protein, carbohydrates, and fat. Like we do need kind of those basics. And of course, pay attention to those carbs so you know how to use this insulin to help you survive. But beyond the conventional approach of knowing your macros, knowing your exchanges of insulin and so forth, I like to go deeper and thinking about nutrient gaps, whole foods, anti-inflammatory, how well you tolerate something. I like to dive deeper in like, what is your digestion like? How can we optimize that? How's your energy? How's your sleep? How's your mental health? So much is connected to mental health, depression, anxiety, and gut health that's something to look into. So functional nutrition is really looking at the full person and not just the basics from the plate. It's thinking about the trajectory of chewing our food thoroughly enough. It's thinking about the enzymes that should be there. Type 1 diabetes is a disease of the pancreas, and some people with type 1 diabetes may at higher risk of lower enzymes to actually be helpful in breaking down protein, fat, and carbohydrates. And then the bacteria. If we have low gut diversity, we might be more susceptible for a leaky gut or a permeable gut that can raise inflammation. The body can raise insulin resistance, can raise inflammation. So it's thinking that through and figuring out how to optimize it and pay attention and get to know better and see what type of diet works better for everyone. I mentioned, when I had my accident, I was looking out the window of the Alfred Hospital. I was like, I'm going to eat whole real food and I'm going to drop my carbs real low. And I dropped my carbs real low, but with that, I lost all my fiber. We need fiber to really benefit that bacteria we're trying to cultivate, grow, and optimize. What works for me doesn't work for everyone. We need to see how our biochemistry is individualized and how people thrive with their type 1 diabetes, but in a form of whole food and how those macros may fall. So, and zooming out, but really looking at labs, but also symptoms,
Yeah.
more
And
so.
if we really narrow it down, knuckle down into it, what would you recommend people eat more of or avoid particular
Yeah.
foods?
Yeah. I think what people should do, because it's hard again to say one thing. I mean, I could, but then I would almost regret it. I'd be like, yeah, you take that out. I don't want that to go out in the world because
Yeah.
then I'm going to be like a hater of blah. Uh,
Yeah.
But I think what people should do is try to eat more whole food, of course. But we're in modern life. We're pressured. We have stress. We have full agendas. We have careers. We have projects. So sometimes that's not always feasible. But to pay attention while eating healthier, cleaner, less processed, to what foods make your blood sugar sticky and stubborn. And that's kind of where I realize, like, okay, I'm eating these high fiber wraps, but I'm dosing my insulin, but my blood sugar is not going down whatsoever. And I identified by paying attention to sticky higher blood sugars that I'm not very tolerant to gluten. So since 2009, I've been gluten free. And I remember I pulled gluten out of my diet, still ate the same amount of carbohydrates, but my insulin went down 30%. Gluten just didn't work for me. And gluten, I would say, doesn't work for a decent percentage of people with type 1 diabetes. That might be bad news, but we're at risk of a leakier gut, and gluten stimulates something called zonulin that opens up those tight junctions and can create more leakiness. So there is some relationship there. Not everyone needs to be gluten-free, but that might be something to look at. But more so, look at your blood sugars, see where blood sugars are tricky, what food's making it tricky, and then kind of zero it down from there.
That's so interesting, isn't it? Because there's so many different factors to your body and to food and diabetes, of
Yeah.
course. There's so much at play, which is incredible.
Yeah.
Can I
And there's
ask?
functional tests too to figure this out. And I believe you can go to some naturopath in Australia. I have friends that I still like asking me for advice. And I'm like, do this. And I'm like, is this available there? But there are functional tests that can kind of cut to the chase.
Yeah.
Like food sensitivity. Not all of them are
Yeah.
good. Don't buy ones like off Instagram. There's a lot of crap ones.
Yeah.
Same in the US. But there are some testing if you're like, okay, I want to do an elimination diet. This is impossible.
Yeah.
I feel overwhelmed. We have enough to deal with. Too.
Exactly right. We have enough to deal with. It's exactly right. So it's definitely something to think about if you're struggling, I suppose, with diabetes and nutrition. I do want to ask you, what does your diet now look like compared to, I suppose, what it used to look like, maybe pre-diagnosis or pre-Australia?
Yeah. I would say pre-Australia, I was just heavily focused on carbohydrates and minimizing them and finding all the high fiber versions to get although I don't dose insulin for net carbohydrates, that just doesn't work for my numbers, but I would seek out low carb things because fiber is there. But I would get myself in this gluten situation. So I would say pre-Australia, I was eating more processed things that were low carb and also eating much lower carb. I'd be like, I want 50 grams or 80 grams or less than 100. And if I were to throw my food in some food app that gave me all the data, I'm probably closer to 150 grams of carbohydrates. That works better for my energy, my workouts, my sleep, my cycle, my hormones, my weight management, my satiety. My protein is much higher. I'm more intentional with protein. I was kind of mocking power protein, but I didn't really focus on protein other than some proteins on my plate. But now I really use my hand as a guide. I tell clients, use your hand as a guide, and you want the sides of the palm of your hand, thickness and width, to be a portion of protein on your plate or more, especially if you're active and lifting weights or aging over 35 or more to help with that maintaining of muscle mass and so forth. So I'm intentional about my protein and then also intentional about getting my fiber, but from whole real food. So I'll reach for more berries. I'll reach for more chia seeds or flax seeds. I'll reach for more cruciferous vegetables versus these wraps and fiber crackers and fiber bars and so forth is where my diet's moved towards.
Yeah, and you're so in tune with your diet and your body, aren't you? It sounds
Yeah.
It can be really tricky, obviously, for someone who's not, I guess, an expert in the area.
For sure. Yeah.
So I guess like where, if someone's struggling or would just like to know more, where would someone sort of start
Yeah.
to look or yeah.
Yeah. I'm almost laughing. You keep calling me an expert, and I don't feel like an expert, but I've just failed forward. I have failed forward enough to like know. And I said I was a little wrecked for this podcast because this weekend I traveled with my daughter for a soccer tournament.
Mhm.
And growing up, I was very much into travel soccer, and I didn't have a CGM then. I just remember so many times on the soccer field being like, what is my blood sugar doing? Do I need to grab a juice box? And my coach would throw me a juice box onto the field. I'd crush it in a second, throw it off. So, and I really I'm like, I am just so in tune with my body. And I'm age 41 now. And I can tell like my estrogen's dropping versus progesterone. Like and it might be just like all placebo, but I am very in tune, I think more than the average person. But
Mm.
I credit those seizures I had early on because I was so scared to have a seizure before I went to bed, and like the soccer days and just surviving all my sports and so forth to be more in tune. But if someone were to start, and I credit my journey of having 2 children as being a mom, I learned so much about type 1 diabetes and my type 1 diabetes because I was pregnant and I was responsible for someone else. And the way I really optimized my health in was pen and paper. I would get a spiral notebook and I would just write down what I am. I would write my blood sugar at that meal, circle it, write my blood sugar after the meal, circle it, and just kind of look at it. Not every day, not study it to a T, but I'd throw it in there. If something was off, I'd be like, okay, what can I figure out from here is going wrong or what variables at play and how can I fix that tomorrow? And I believe type 1 diabetes is a matter of course correcting. I say that a lot. It's a matter of course correcting. If I ate today, I had sweet potato on top of a salad with some shredded chicken and dressing for my lunch. And, I took 3 units of insulin. It covered it pretty well. But let's say I went way high. I'd probably eat the same lunch tomorrow because it's still in my fridge. I have plenty of leftovers. And I would reflect on today, see what that was like, and think about how to do it different. Do I need more insulin? Do I need a bigger pre-bolus? Do I need to dose it different? So I think a lot of our learning curve comes from analysis. We can't, maybe if we're burning out, we can play ignorance and just like try to get through. But I think reflection is essential.
Yeah, and it's honing in really, isn't it, on what's happening with your body and diabetes.
Yeah.
And like you say, analyzing. I think analyzing is the perfect word for it, and it's jotting down and keeping track of what your body's doing.
Yeah.
And it can be, obviously, like you said too, with burnout and stuff, it can be really tricky. And like I, at the moment, am just super busy, right? So there's just a lot of things at play, and I'm sort of riding the wave a little bit with diabetes, but I guess when you take the time to hone in on what your body's doing and focusing on your body is where you find out what's happening with your diabetes.
Yeah. Yeah. And I will say too, excuse me, that I hope people listening today is not comparing their chapter 1 to mine now, chapter 12. And I have come a long way, and it's just taken a lot of curiosity and a whole lot of grace. And, just try to move forward 1%, or you'll have those seasons where you just need to tread water. And I've been in those seasons, and that season might show up tomorrow, but it's not predictable when that disease is going to come. But just give yourself grace, tread water, and just try to be in tune. And the best thing we can do for ourselves, diabetic or not, is really protect our sleep. When we don't protect our sleep, we can be at risk for insulin resistance very easily. There was a study done in 2012 in the US, and it was on men. So there's no hormonal cycles going on. Most studies were done on men before the 1970s, 80s. And they were put in a sleep lab. And it's one of my favorite studies because it really highlights the point. These 22-year-old men in a sleep lab, all these labs taking controlled diet, slept adequately for 3 nights. And their blood sugar was one of the things measured was normal. 3 nights later, they were sleep deprived 6 hours or less. Excuse me. And they woke up as pre-diabetic. These very healthy individuals woke up as pre-diabetics because they were sleep deprived. And sleep is hard to get sometimes, but it's something we should always prioritize the most we can.
Gotta love sleep, right? Sleep's just the best.
Yeah. Yeah.
Definitely need more of it.
Yeah.
I want to dive into you've done a TED Talk,
Yes.
which is amazing. Do you want to tell us about your TED Talk a little bit?
Sure. I will specify it was TEDx.
Oh, yeah. Yep.
Maybe one day I'll make it to TED. One day. Hear me now.
Still an amazing achievement.
Yes.
It's such a cool thing to put on the resume. Yeah.
It was one of my proudest moments, and it was probably one of my proudest moments because my kids were there. I feel like I can get emotional, but
yeah,
it was wild, and it came to me, and that's even more interesting. So here in the U.S., you can apply to TEDx events, and try to be a speaker. But they approached me and they're like, hey, we'd like you to interview for this role. And I did. And I was like, well, I want to do something about diabetes. And it took a while to figure out what my topic is. But the topic of my talk was type 1 diabetes is not about blood sugars. And some of the key messages I had within my TEDx, and gosh, I should have it memorized, but it's a little rusty. It was over a year ago, are things I'm proud of. And one of those is like limitations to carbohydrates. One of those things is we need to just not look for our blood sugars, but we need to treat and prevent disease because our risk of, cardiovascular disease, cancer, kidney failure, dementia, etc., is exponentially higher. And that's why, one, every day is grappling with and understanding what we need to do for our blood sugars. But again, how can we take care of ourselves was kind of a closing message. And at the end of the day, our most powerful tool is our fork. And we just need to slow it down and think about what that meal is, how we can plan it better, optimize it, enjoy it.
I was actually about to mention that you mentioned that your most powerful tool is your fork. What does that mean to you? And how can people use that quote in their day-to-day life?
I think in short, what it means is we have power. We have power to create change and optimize ourselves. And whatever's on the end of that fork can either one, help us survive, or it can help us thrive. And it's that simple.
Yeah, I think that's very important not to overthink it, but to also think about what you're putting in your body. Yeah, which is a great piece of advice. And another thing from your TED talk is one person's medicine is another person's poison. How do you help clients figure out what works for them in your role?
Yeah. It's really a matter of zooming out and seeing like where, it's a thorough analysis, it's a long conversation, tangents everywhere, but it's kind of identifying like where's this person's weak links? Where do they need the most support? And I think it's not just what we eat, but it's when we eat, it's how we eat, it's who we eat with. There's so many layers. We want to quickly demonize carbs, but that's a really small percentage of what we need to really optimize overall. So it's a unique answer. It's unique to the person.
Absolutely, yeah. And on that same vein of thought, how can someone start tuning into their body to start feeling more confident, and speaking up, especially when there's so much out there that people can search, and there's so many, different sources of knowledge. How can someone really start tuning into their own body, do you think?
Yeah, I think not looking to like all the different influencers on social. I think it's fun. There's a lot of clickbait. There's a lot of repeated messages and so forth, but it can feel like paralysis. I think if you know someone that's good to hire out, if you're really feeling overwhelmed, but overall, I think nutrition shouldn't be complicated. There's just a lot of different advice. There's a lot of different products. There's a lot of different services to build this industry that it can feel overwhelming and scary. But at the end of the day, we should eat as close to the farm as possible. And when we're really busy, analyze it for ourselves. And I would start with like, how is your digestion? And this might get graphic. I'm a dietitian, so I talk about it every day with my clients is how is your digestion?
Mhm.
Are you going to the bathroom today? If you're going to the bathroom, what does it look like? Is the color right? Is the shape right? Of that bowel movement is where I'm getting. And if you're not looking in the toilet, then you have no clue how your health is. And I think it's important because we need good bowel movements on a daily basis. If not, our body can get toxic. We can recirculate that estrogen, men and women, and that can just be a cascade of hormone imbalance and a variety of things. But we really need to look at how's our digestion? Are we going to the bathroom every day? If not, we need to figure out how. Change it with diet, utilizing supplements, utilizing fiber, utilizing hydration, utilizing walking after meals, and so forth. So I really almost start from the bottom up.
Pardon the pun. Quite literally. Oh, that's amazing. I think, you've given so much great advice, and there's so many key messages for people out there who are listening to hone in on it and cling to. And I want you to be able to give the opportunity to plug. Are you on socials?
Yes.
And where do people find you?
I'd love if people reached out. So I'm diabetic dietitian, and dietitian in the US is spelled different. It's with a T, not a C. So it's diet, ITIAN.
Yeah.
I don't know. Do you guys spell it with a C? I think that's how.
Yeah.
Okay.
I'm trying
So
to think
I'm
now.
diabetic.
Yeah. I'm like, hang on, how do we actually spell it? Diet,
Well, a lot of Americans,
Dietician. Yeah.
yeah. Well, here in the US, we do things different, and it's with a T, not a C. So diabetic dietitian on Instagram. I'm active on LinkedIn. My website is T1D Functional Nutrition.com. And my email is Kelly at T1D Functional Nutrition.com. And reach out. I'd love to connect. I do coach overseas. If you just want more personalization, I'm happy to do that. And yeah.
That's so great. And one last question for you before we let you run off into the evening.
Yeah.
What's one piece of advice that you would give someone who's been newly diagnosed with diabetes?
Absolutely. I would say two things. Number one is just give yourself grace. Give yourself grace throughout this journey, especially right away. And secondly is find someone with type 1, a friend. So you can have that late night message, that late night emergency, because it might be needed. You might need, test strips. You might need a CGM. You might need a bottle of insulin because something happened. And it might be just a phone call to cry. I think it's so important to have a connection with someone with type 1 who just gets it. And maybe it's this podcast or this community or whatnot.
We hope so.
Yeah. I just am grateful for the opportunity to connect with you. And maybe one day we can actually meet in person.
Absolutely. If you come back to Australia, reach out, let us know.
Yeah.
Or if we're, in the States, we'll let you know. It'd be great to meet up with you. But thank you so much for taking the time out of obviously your busy life and for jumping on the podcast with us today. We really appreciate it.
My pleasure.
Thank you.
Strip Supply acknowledges the traditional owners of the land we have recorded this podcast on. We pay our respects to their elders past, present, and emerging.